Hey listeners, this is your host Brian Almeida. I just wanted to hop on here before this episode gets started to let you know that there won't be any new episodes for the next couple of weeks, as I'll be taking a break for the holiday season. In the new year, I'll be releasing another solo episode to give you guys some updates on my life and to share some news that I've been waiting to tell you guys. Aside from that, I just wanted to give you guys a huge thank you and show my appreciation for listening to everything so far, and I really hope that you're enjoying the message that I'm trying to spread here and that it's making an impact on your life. All right, guys, hope you have a great holiday season, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Welcome to the Vulnerable Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Almeida. Each week, we'll share the inspiring story of someone who has faced their share of vulnerability and been able to find success and fulfillment. We hope all our stories will help you find the strength within yourself to live the life you want and find success of your own. Caroline Gosen said, "I have a million career weaknesses, and although it's uncomfortable, I believe that authentically acknowledging and working through your vulnerability is more powerful than the delusion of perfection." This is episode 14 of the Vulnerable Podcast with Gorett Reis. She would face her fair share of difficulties growing up, and it caught up with her in high school. Academically, she'd always been a really great student, but about halfway through high school, it started to slip. Her grades were dropping, she wasn't as engaged, and worst of all, she hadn't really noticed or didn't care. Thanks to some teachers, she was asked to join a one-year alternative program for at-risk students that was being launched at her school for the first time. Even though at the time it seemed like the worst thing to be asked, considering she was usually a good student, it ended up being a turning point in her life and teaching her some lessons that she'd carry into adulthood. At a young age, she moved out on her own and would continue to pursue education, ending up with a total of 3 degrees. This helped her land a career as a teacher, and for years things were going okay. A decent paying job with benefits and an opportunity to put all her education to work. But it wasn't long before she began to feel lost, burnt out, and wondering if there was something more she was meant to do. Considering how she liked to help others in the alternative program, and even earlier in her life, her next career moves seemed meant to be. Now she's a certified life coach, career coach, and speaker, working with professionals who are looking to advance their careers or find direction. Ultimately, her clients desire more fulfillment and financial security like she once did. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get vulnerable with Gorett Reis. Hey, Gorett, thank you for coming on the Vulnerable Podcast. I'm really excited to have you on. We met a couple of years ago at a conference, and you helped me out a lot that day, just with some quick tips and stuff that you gave me on what was going on in my life, and I really appreciate that. And like I said, I really appreciate you coming on to share your story. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So the first question I like to ask every guest is, what is your definition of vulnerability?
I thought about this, but it actually came quick to me. So I defined vulnerability to be where you can truly open up and truly be seen by somebody, actually by another or others. So not just one person, could be others. Depends on the situation, but it depends on the context. It's where you share the less exposed side of yourself, which typically takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, no, awesome. And the one thing that I find, and I say this almost every single interview, and I think it's just a good point to bring up, is that it seems like nobody has the same definition, which is the best part about this. And that's the whole thing I'm trying to achieve with the podcast, is getting different opinions, different perspectives, so that each person that listens, they might not relate with the first episode or the third episode, but maybe your episode is the one that hits home with them. So, but
Right.
But I definitely agree. It's definitely, I feel like for me, just opening up to my wife and to those closest around me in the last couple of years and being a little more vulnerable has been a great experience for me. So I definitely agree with your definition.
Yeah, actually, speaking of courage, I was first introduced to the connection between vulnerability and courage with Brené Brown's book, The Gifts of Imperfections. Have you read that?
No, I've been watching a lot of her videos. And I did watch her Netflix special, but I haven't read any of her books yet.
Okay, well, it's similar message and stuff like that to the Netflix documentary, The Cult to Courage, or talk at least. And I mean, if you think about it, I guess the connection between vulnerability and courage is not that, surprising. However, she really goes in depth, and she uses examples from her own life and to illustrate. She goes vulnerable, right?
Yeah, no,
So
definitely.
it's
I
great.
remember even in the series, it was sort of the same thing where she talks about her personal life, her marriage, her kids, all that kind of stuff. And even one of my past guests a few episodes ago, I think it was Anna McAfee, was
Mhm.
talking more about family and the vulnerabilities of being a parent and stuff like that. And it was an interesting perspective because I don't have that. I mean, I don't have children yet, so I don't have that perspective. And some of the other guests that I had on don't either. So again, that's the interesting part of this, is seeing the different perspectives and different ways
Right.
that people
A
look at things.
diversity of, yeah,
Exactly.
people's take on,
Exactly.
yeah. Excellent.
So what would you say is your earliest memory of facing vulnerability or going through some sort of struggle in your life?
Oh, I'm not sure about earliest per se, but I think that if I'm going to go back a bit, I would say high school days for sure. I, I it was a very challenging time for me, and yeah, so just difficulties at home, and there was actually a couple of years of high school that I didn't live at home, and I just it was just not necessarily a good time, and I signed up for advanced courses, and advanced courses I guess now would be academic courses, and I I thought no, okay, I knew I wasn't doing that well, but I thought I was keeping it together. And then I think it was grade 10 or 11, and I was asked to be part of this program, this alternative program. And I think, yeah, I don't remember which year, 10 or 11. And I believe it was 10. And it was called RAP. It was Retention Reintegration Assistance Program, and it was for at-risk students.
Huh.
And I was like, well, I'm taking advanced courses. Well, what? And but then I realized, like, yeah, I'm not really doing the work. I was checked out essentially. So they saw that, people took notice. Well, teachers and guidance counselor took notice, and so I ended up, bearing my ego and accepting the program, and going in. It was lovely. It was awesome. I had a great time. It had academics, but it focused on outdoor activities and leadership building, and it was amazing, and vocational skills and stuff like that. I did a co-op during that year. It was amazing. I had a great time, and but that was a vulnerable time for me to be, well, me at risk. I was, right, like that was the reality of it. I just didn't admit it to myself, and so yeah, I was, it was just, again, high school wasn't the greatest time. I was really bullied too. I mean, I was bullied in elementary, but it was bullied. It continued in high school. I was a bit of a loner. I mean, I had friends here and there, or, pockets of groups I would hang out with,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
really kept to myself. And that's the point of what I actually wanted to connect with the whole, well, it is a vulnerable story that I'm sharing. However, I just feel that, it actually, vulnerability to me, of a journey. It was something that, as I aged and grew and healed, right, that I became more vulnerable, because as I was younger, right, being that loner and shutting people off, and guarding myself, and having people at so yeah, I wasn't very vulnerable growing up, and but that was a vulnerable time for me.
No,
And
and I can relate 100%. I mean, if you listen back to my episode, which was the first one, or which will be the first one, I should say, because this
okay,
hasn't been released yet at this
I was
point.
going to
But
say, I didn't.
anyways, by
No.
the time they get to this episode, they're going to be like, what? I've already listened to it. But anyways, um,
Right.
the point being is that when I did my episode or told my story, I had a very similar situation throughout high school. I wasn't, like you're saying, I wasn't a loner by any means, but I didn't really have like that set group of friends. Each year of high school, I found that I was changing my style, the music that I listened to, basically who I was to fit in with a certain group of people. So I wasn't really myself. So in a lot of ways, I was pretty alone because I never wanted to be just Brian. I was always trying to be, this type of person, or like I said, dress in this type of way so that a certain group of people would accept me. I could be in the clique or whatever you want to call it. So I
Very
can
interesting.
definitely relate to what you're saying.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting listening to you, because it sounded like you were motivated by belonging, correct?
In some ways, I guess you could say so, yeah. Because, like I said, I mean, whether it was the
Yeah.
type of music that I was listening to or the way I was
Yeah.
dressing, it was something to make me feel like I
Yeah.
fit in with that group of
Right.
people.
Yeah, I guess from my experiences, I didn't care. Not that I didn't care. It was more like, I think that in my experience, it was more of a, I look the way I look and I am the way I am. And it was more to keep people at bay.
Hmm. Okay.
So
Yeah.
it was a little bit of, but I mean, there are parallels for sure to the story. Yeah.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, and I didn't get to that until I reached college. In college is when I finally decided, okay, I just got to be me, and people are going to accept it or they're not. But I
Yeah.
definitely would have probably been, I would have been able to discover a little more about myself had I done that a little sooner. So I can appreciate the fact that you sort of decided to do that, in high school. Because I think that's I feel like if I talk to anybody, whether it's like my wife, friends, family, whoever it is, I feel like high school is that weird spot for almost everybody, because you're trying to figure out a lot of stuff, and then you just sort of get thrown into life. It's like,
Right.
whoa.
You're finding yourself. You're individuating from your family. So it's, yeah, there's a lot going on there. Hormones. I
Yeah,
mean,
definitely.
there's so much going on.
No, definitely.
So yeah, it was definitely a difficult time, but it was exacerbated from also the challenging past I had, or the childhood. But yeah, so I went into this program and it was lovely, and I ended up going back into academics. So I think maybe grade 11 and 12 then, if I can remember correctly. And then I did OECs back then. It was grade 13. uh, yeah, I got accepted to 3 universities and went to one. And then I ended up going to 3 universities. Actually. Yeah, I went to Waterloo, St. Francis Xavier, and U of T. But I ended up transferring pretty much most of my credits, not all, because they wouldn't accept all. But then I ended up getting 3 degrees at the University of Toronto, and yeah, with a really high grade point average. So it actually worked. So whatever that turnaround, whatever that time, so I could have had the narrative that I'm not a good student, that I will always be at risk, and I didn't buy into that.
So, I mean, aside from this program that you were put into that seems to have helped you overcome that situation that you were going through of falling behind in school and not really achieving what you thought you were, what else would you say helped you overcome that whole situation?
Well, I think the program, 'cause it's interesting because when I reflect on my high school experiences, I really don't think about that program. And it's funny that I'm bringing it up and highlighting it during this podcast. But actually, it did help me. I would say the 2 other things that actually helped me during high school and all that was my favorite teacher, my art teacher during the time, Mr. Moda. He was a great mentor. He was the only person I felt really cared.
Hmm.
So that really uplifted me and allowed me to believe in myself a little bit, right? And the other one was becoming good friends with somebody back, I think it was in grade 11. Yeah, grade 11 or grade 12. So, and then she invited me into her circle, but it was not so much her circle, it was her, right? It was more,
Yeah.
speaking of vulnerability, didn't really trust her in the beginning. I was like, who is she? What is this? But then she's still like a good friend of mine. She's my, yeah, good friend. I would say sister, because her family's like my second family. And I think that also, having that experience or experiences also helped me. Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting, and it's sort of it's. I'm kind of relating it back to a past episode where one of my guests talked about a difficult situation that they were going through in terms of their family, and they said that what helped them was sort of similar to you in terms of like it was friends, having people to sort of talk to, and people that were there for them, their support, even like you said with that teacher. I mean, I know for myself, even in the last couple of years, the only way that I've been able to sort of push through the difficulties that I've faced and get to where I'm at right now is because of the support of others, my wife being the main one, and then some of the friends that I've met even just recently. Like one of my closest friends is somebody that I only met like 2 years ago, but he's been there over this last couple of years where things have been at their highest highs and their lowest lows, and willing to pick up the phone and have that conversation. So I can definitely see how that would be helpful.
That's
So
amazing if you have that in your life.
yeah, I know.
You're truly blessed.
110%,
No,
definitely.
seriously, because we can have friends, but are they there for you at your lowest and your highest,
Yes.
right?
The good,
So
the bad, and the ugly, as I like to put it.
exactly, all of it. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah. So I would say that helped me. Accepting help helped me, right? Saying, okay, fine, I'll go into this program. I could have resisted. I could have just kept going on the path, but to choose that, to put out my ego aside, I think a few things happened there. Yeah.
So what new strength would you say you discovered in yourself through going through that program? What is it that you found out new, like about yourself that you maybe didn't know you had?
Uh, well, it's funny because I ended up helping a lot of people with their academics in the program. So, and it's funny because it brings me back to a grade 3 report card where it was like, I'm helping everybody, right? So I guess that foreshadows my teaching, career and stuff like that. So I that foreshadows that. But I guess I have this real propensity to help others, and that's always been there, like grade 3, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's been there, but also not so much about I learned about myself, but well, it was just something I learned was that I'm not alone. That other students are struggling, other have their stuff going on, and I wasn't alone. So that really helps as well.
Oh, I can definitely see that as well. And again, I keep relating back to my situation, but it's true that when we relate to others, that feeling of loneliness tends to s- calm down a bit because we often feel like, I'm the only one going through this. I'm the only one whose life sucks right now, or
Yeah,
whatever way you want to look at it. And then you
yeah,
put it out there and you're like, oh, no, wait, there's the 100 other people who feel the
exactly.
exact same way. And I experienced that a lot over the last couple of years and sharing my story and putting myself out there. And
Uh-huh.
it seems like a lot of what you experienced was earlier on in life, which I almost wish for myself. But again, we can't go back and we can't harp on the past or think too much about the future. But it's
You
just,
are where you
it's
are. You arrived.
exactly, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
No, so the next question that I ask, and this is one that I find it's hard to place because everybody's sort of definition again of vulnerability is different, and everybody's way of looking at it is, some people look at vulnerability and struggle as these little things, some are the big things. Everybody's different, but would you say that in your life up until this point that you've faced a lot of vulnerability, a little vulnerability, a moderate amount? Like, how would you define it?
How would I quantify?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. The first time I asked the question, it was like, how many times? And they're like, well, I don't know, like 10. Like, so that's why I say, like, do you feel like you faced a lot, a little? Like, how would you sort of define it?
I would say moderate, not really a lot. And I'll tell you why. Just because I think that, as I was saying when I was growing up, I was very guarded. I didn't really trust many people. As I said, I came from a difficult past, and so it was hard to trust. And so I would say, yeah, moderately, because as I grew, and I'm still learning to this day to become more vulnerable. Hence, me accepting and wanting to do this podcast with you, just because it's something that after reading that pivotal book, The Gifts of Imperfections, by Brené Brown back then, I was like, oh my God, right, right, to be more vulnerable. And because again, it was a defense coping mechanism not to. And so I'm still learning. It's still a journey. So I'd say moderate, but I'd like it to be more.
Yeah, no, and again, and see, so this is where where I say it's hard because sort of the way that you're looking at vulnerability in the sense of like, putting yourself out there more, it's harder to find. Whereas other people that I've had on, their vulnerability is more focused on, let's say, like a health issue that they grew up with or something like that. And so when I ask them, they say it's a lot, but it's because of that perspective, right? So this is again why I'm trying to get at this because I want every person that listens, like I said, to be able
Yeah.
to go, well, so for me, like for example with some of these friends, when I hear their stories, I'm like, I've gone through nothing, right? And with
Right.
that perspective, right? So again,
Okay.
it's each person's different, and there's nothing wrong with the way that you're saying it and the way that
Right.
you're looking at it.
Well,
I
the
just like to
way,
get that perspective.
yeah.
Yeah, I just like to get that idea from people,
So
again,
in
to make it.
terms of, okay, so if we're going to equate vulnerability with struggle,
Yeah.
I would say it was off the charts.
Okay. See, well, here you go.
I don't know how to quantify. So again, because I left home fairly early, and anyways, there's this stuff, but it was off the charts. So I would say that yeah, if we were going to make that connection, yeah. But in terms of opening up and showing people who I really am and truly being seen, I think that's still a lifelong journey.
Yeah, no, and again, like I said, it's defined differently by everybody, and the whole point is just to get that perspective. Because again, when people are listening, I want them to be able to relate, just like we talked about. That relatability is where I think people are going to be helped, and the whole point of this podcast isn't so much to focus on the struggles; it's to focus on how you made it out, or what it taught you. Because again, the name VulnerABLE is the
Yeah.
point is the ability to use it to get through things, right? And that's what I've found, like I said, over the last couple of years, that doing the more vulnerable things is what's opened me up more and has given me the strength to move forward and try new things and put myself out there and get uncomfortable, whatever way you want to look at it. So,
Yes.
so
Yes.
at this point, is there, you've alluded on a couple of stories. Is there any other stories that you could share with us that would allow us to sort of get an idea of some other vulnerabilities, some other struggles that you faced in your journey so far?
Okay, if we're going to talk about struggle and we're going to make that connection, then yeah, I would say that, I, well, a big part of my story in terms of my coaching is me being a teacher at one point and just being highly dissatisfied. Not so much with the students, because I had a pretty good dynamic and rapport with the students, not so much that was the administration, it was other things, colleagues. And I also felt there was something missing. So that aside, even administration, colleagues, and culture of the school or schools, that aside, I also have to own up and say it was also something missing. So I can't just say it was a disaster.
External.
Yeah, exactly. It was an internal thing as well. There was something missing always for me. Although, yeah, I've been tutoring and teaching since I can remember. I don't, like I said, from grade 3 at one point. I would say yeah, it got to the point it became unbearable. I was seeing sleep doctors, naturopath,
Wow.
GPs, because my health took a real hit, like a real hit. And I just could not sustain it. I didn't know how to continue. I was taking power naps during my breaks or during lunch. When I say power naps, 15 minutes, because you still have to prep and
Yeah.
do all the other things. But it just became unbearable. So I decided that was it. It was just time to change. And one of my favorite quotes is by Anais Nin, and this is on my website and stuff. But it's essentially, and the day came that the risk it took to blossom. No, the pain or something about like the risk it took to blossom was less painful than the risk it took to stay tight in a bud, essentially. Or I'm really butchering it now.
Yeah. No, but I get what you're.
What's hilarious is I know that off by heart. I know that quote, but right now it's not coming to me. Speaking of vulnerability, right here, I do know that quote. But essentially, it's that pain, that remaining tight in a bud, staying the same, staying small, right, staying where you're at or whatever, staying stagnant, was more painful than actually taking the risk to go out there and do that. And that's, it literally was, to me, that point was more painful. So I was like, I'm going into the unknown. I'm taking this risk to become, a life and career coach. And that was that.
No, and it sounds to me like in some ways it was almost like burnout, which I feel like, and I mean, it's not that I know a ton of teachers, but I know a few, and I've never really heard anybody talk about that career in that way. Like most teachers that I know, they're raving about the fact that, they get a couple months off during the summer and, and the job's pretty good and the benefits and the this and that. And I mean, I find that with almost any job, to be completely honest, is everybody raves about how good the benefits are and stuff like that. But to me, the only reason that benefits are any good is if it's benefiting your life in general. If what you're doing isn't benefiting your life in general, then I don't know what type of benefits, what type of pay, what type of anything can really make up for that. And that's, again, my opinion. But it's really interesting to me to sort of, when you were saying about, taking power naps, I've never really heard anybody say that or have that sort of feeling from teaching, at least. Yeah.
Just didn't have the energy. I literally was trying to conserve and preserve and have energy for teaching, and that was towards the end. That was like the last few years. I also want to qualify. However, I mean, at one point I was a student teacher, and I had 93 kids. But when I say kids, students in English classes, right? And 3 of them, I think all of them, were university prep. And the marking was insane, because you want to prep them for university. So you want to give them the assignments, right? But it was insane. The marking almost almost put me out. Literally, you're just marking for like, I don't know, a month and a half or something that you did
Jeez.
wrong. Like, it was insane. Like, I don't know, a few weeks or something. And yeah, and in terms of middle school, because I had that experience as well. So I'd say less marking in a way, like, well, but a lot of prep. So
Yeah.
it was a different, I don't know. So
Different
I
type.
just,
It was a different stressor, I guess.
yeah. And it was just the quality, going back to, if you want to call it work-life balance or work-life integration, wasn't really there for me.
Huh. Again, like this is just, it's interesting for me because like I said, I don't know a ton of teachers, but I know a few, and I've never really, I've heard like the same sort of thing about, it's a lot of marking, and when people think that they've got like 2 months off during the summer, there's things that they have to do and so on and so forth. But this is just a completely new sort of perspective for me
Interesting.
on the career. And I think it's in a good, I like this because if there's somebody out there that's thinking about becoming a teacher and they haven't heard anything like this, that it might, and then not to deter them, but at
Yeah.
least give them a realistic expectation. Because,
Mhm.
again, I think a lot of people look at it as like, good pension, good this, good that. And I think a lot of us sometimes choose careers based on things like that. Like what has the best pension, what has the best benefits, what has, the best pay range or whatever. And it's, in the last couple of years, I've had to question a lot of those things myself, because for years I did sales and that's all I did. And that's all I thought I was ever going to do. And I was, trying to make $100,000 a year and be a sales manager. And it was all about positions and money and this. And
Wow.
in the last couple of years, I've realized how little any of that matters when, like I said, if the quality of your life isn't good, it
Yeah,
doesn't matter the quality of everything else, because
it's so true.
you're
It's
going
so
to, you're going to burn out or whatever it is faster. So
Well, if you're dissatisfied in your career, then that's a good chunk of your life. Right?
no, for sure.
It usually spills over into other areas, hence me being a career and life coach, because it does, but when it's yeah, very, very integrated. In terms of what you said, yeah, I don't want to, like, I'm sure your friends are speaking the truth, and I'm sure they are having a great experience, and so to each their own, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure they're having a, and for the most part, I would have to say that you can get into a groove, like if you are teaching the same thing, right? If you're teaching the same thing, the first year is going to be, oh my God, right? Like, so, and then afterwards you're like, oh, I got this, like, or I already have the outlines for this. I can just, modify it or adapt it. And so, yeah, it can get easier, I guess. But then again, a lot of people are getting switched up right now in terms of what they're teaching, and there's surplus, or they're getting bumped into other, because there's not enough teaching jobs currently in Ontario. So people are getting surplus, or it takes a long time to even get, So yeah, a teaching
Oh
job.
yeah, I've seen that for sure. I've seen a few friends where they've had to like travel to the US or whatever to go to teachers college because it's harder to get in here. And then even after they've finished it, they've spent years doing like supply teaching and stuff like that because they can't get that permanent placement, or they're moving around, they're jumping around. And again, like I said, it's everybody's way of looking at it, and everybody's, journey towards it is going to be different. But it's just, like I said, it's just interesting to hear it this way. One thing I want to sort of touch on, and I'm just thinking about it because of a past interview and with this talk that me and my past guests had about education. You said you went to school and you got 3 degrees. I mean, I have 0 degrees. I have a college diploma, and I know people that have degrees, and I know the intense amount of work that goes behind that. And would you say that, doing all that work, would you say there was struggle with that? I mean, like just in terms of the amount of work, and then also where I wanted to sort of touch on, if you're okay with it, is, do you find that that's helped you a lot where you're at now, or do you find that it helped you more when you were in sort of that career area of like being a teacher?
Okay, so definitely a lot of work. And I would say I also had to contend with inner demons as well, whether I should be there, whether I was enough, whether I was smart enough. So there was definitely episodes during, I would say, all 3 degrees, like all 3 different universities and degrees. Well, no, my last 2 were fine. No, my last 2 were pretty good, just because I now had the confidence. I already built it. Like, I already knew I could do it. But during my undergrad, holy moly, I would definitely say I definitely struggled. I did well, for the most part. I did well. I would say that I got on the dean's list at Waterloo, even though I didn't. Anyways, I won't go into that, but I didn't give it my all, and I ended up
Yeah.
on these, which was great. Which was great. And then what really, I guess, U of T, St. FX, I also, yes, I was on the dean list, I believe, as well. And U of T, I just know that when I transferred my credits and stuff like that, it was a whole other level. Just not to say, by the way, I'm not saying that St. FX is not great in Waterloo. They have great programs and great everything. This is my experience, and I just want to speak about my experience and programs I took. I do not want to minimize those universities at all. But anyways, I guess the first year I was at University of Toronto, I didn't do as well, but then I picked it up really, really quickly after. And, but I definitely struggled. Oh my goodness. Oh my. There was, like I said, the inner demons, sometimes I had to take breaks. I didn't do my undergrad back to back. I did not do it. I took some years. I traveled, I worked, and people are like, "You're never going to go back." I'm like, "Oh, I'm going back.
I'm going to show you.
I'm going back." To me, and I'm a big proponent of the destination, but I also am a big proponent of the journey. So at the time I was like, yeah, this is my journey, and I'll get to the destination when I get to it. And of course I did, because obviously I did 2 degrees after. But definitely there were sometimes some breakdowns and stuff like that. It was just definitely not I think, again, a lot of it was me contending with whether I could do it or not, and whether I could actually achieve it or not. So I think that was that. And so your second question in terms of how it's helped me in my current.
Well, yeah, just I don't know. Like I feel like there's a lot of people around me, at least, that, whether it's friends or acquaintances or whatever, who did education like you did. They did a fair amount of education. They got their degree or degrees, and not everybody feels like it's helped them fully to where they're at now. Like, and again, I'm not trying to get you to expose anything or whatever, but I'm curious, because you're the first person I've had on that I can think of who's said something like that, like where they have multiple degrees. And a couple other people that I've had on have talked more about how they don't have as much education. So it's just interesting for me to sort of get an idea of, obviously I'm sure it helped you, getting into the teacher's profession and everything, and maybe it's still helped you now. I'm just curious. This is just my own curiosity, I would say.
Well, there's different thoughts going on as you ask. I don't regret going through that journey, and I don't regret doing the 3 degrees, because of course it led me to exactly where I am. Did it help tremendously and completely with my current position? No. Maybe with teaching, of course. Yes. Yeah. We're going to look at the teaching aspect 100%, right? So we're looking at that. But right now, no. I guess the only thing it really benefited was developing my writing skills.
Okay.
Right? I definitely have to give it. And of course, I feel like I would have been a critical reader otherwise, but it definitely, I think close reading, critical reading also. So I don't want to, of course I developed skills during university. Is it the end all be all though? No.
Well, I think that's what I'm trying to get at, because again, like and again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or whatever, but it's just, it's a curiosity of mine, because like I said, I've talked with a few other guests, and they've talked about, either going through university and not feeling like it helped them, or where they walked away from it, or they didn't go at all. And so like I said, you're the first person I've had on that I can think of. I'm only 13 or so interviews in, but you're the first person that I've had on who's gone through that much education. So I just wanted to get a perspective on it again, because I think this is interesting. One of my other guests, he went through university, he finished it, and he didn't feel like he really gained a lot or knew any more about what he wanted to do. And it took him jumping through 3 or 4 different professions before he finally decided on where he's at now. And I'm sure what he did in university is helping him now, but it took him that sort of career exploration to actually find out where he wanted to go. So again, it's just to get an idea, like I said.
And I think there are many educated people, like very, very educated people who didn't go to, university, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't have that elitist, if you're not educated, if you didn't go to a formal, school or post-secondary school. So I'm not into that. I think there are a lot of brilliant people who are self-taught, even, whether they or have college degrees or less, right? So I don't think, Okay, so this is tough because there's so many things to unpack here because
Yeah.
there's a lot of societal expectations surrounding education, I feel, to do a certain route, to do a traditional route. But for, I wouldn't say a lot of entrepreneurs, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs also got an education, but I would say for some entrepreneurs, I mean, it's not really relevant.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not really relevant, and it didn't really help with their entrepreneurship. I mean, they just went on their own, or they dropped out of school, or so. Yeah, I would say to that point, I did a 10-month training course to become a life coach, a certified life coach, and then I also career coach because that was mainly what people are coming to me with, right? So yeah, no, I say that course that I did 10 months. I mean, got me a career in what I love, and getting the income that I don't think would be close to what I got with my 3 degrees.
Huh. Interesting. Interesting. And again, and this is what I like too, because somebody out there could be thinking about, going to university or becoming a coach or whatever. And even that point you just made of like, maybe take that 10-month course to become a coach and then decide, because that 10 months will be a lot less than 3 or 4 years in university, just to find out that, that degree or whatever isn't really what you wanted in the long run. Right. So, and again, I've just got into this point because I've had a lot of conversations around this. I've got, again, family who they're in that 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old range, and they've either gone to school or didn't go to school or went to school for a year and then decided on a different direction. And so it's just something that's come up, so I just wanted to get your perspective on it.
Ooh.
So
Yeah, again, there's more to say, but
for sure.
essentially, I think I covered the points. Is that I think that we are so, as a society, well, one way we just go to higher education and that's it, and there are other ways.
Yeah.
Absolutely, there are other ways. But I say ultimately, you do you.
Yeah.
If you feel post secondary, you want to go that route, you feel that is going to get you close to your goals or your dreams, and do that. If you don't feel that, then don't. Like,
Yeah. No, I
I'd
agree.
say, you do you.
I agree. So how would you say all these different things that you've been through, from, high school days through, moving out at a younger age to everything that we've talked about, becoming a teacher, then deciding that that wasn't fulfilling for you and moving to something else, all these different things that you would get to, how would you say that those things helped you get to where you are right now as a career and life coach?
Well, so actually, that's one of the points when I believe you're going to ask me of, 3 pieces of advice or
Yeah,
3 things, and
definitely.
that's something I was going to get into. However, I'll just say now that because of my struggles and because of what I went through growing up, I I definitely went into a lot of reading and self-help and pop psychology and things that spoke to me and helped me look at things differently or help me heal. And I would have never thought, wildest dreams, cause that was definitely a passion. I loved consuming those books, and I loved, watching Oprah, and I loved all like that stuff. And I had no idea that was me developing. Like, I don't think if I didn't come from the past that I did, that I would have been on this trajectory or became the coach I am.
Hmm. Interesting. Oh, interesting. And again, to me, it's interesting how people, that's one thing I have seen a similarity of through these episodes, is that it seems like these struggles and these difficulties that we go through are what lead us to where we're eventually supposed to get. And again, then some people have said, that they don't think they're ever going to get to a destination because they don't believe there is one. So interesting, different ways of looking at things. So
Yeah.
would you say at this point in your life, where you're at right now with your career and everything, would you say that you found success and fulfillment in your life, or that you're still on your journey towards it?
Well, well. That is a good question. I think because absolutely am I satisfied, and I feel very, very, very appreciative of the life that I've designed so far. But I don't also want to say, yeah, that's it. Like, not from not coming from a place of never enough, but just from a place of growing and continuing to evolve. That makes sense. Does
No,
that
it
make sense?
does. It does. It does. And to be honest, that's, I feel like, something that's been similar with every person that's answered that question. I like how you thought it was a trick question though, because nobody's ever pulled that on me before. But most people have said, that they're on this constant journey of growing and learning. But I've also had a couple people where they said, no, where I'm at right now, if this was it, I'd be more than happy with it. And I feel
Oh, yeah.
successful and fulfilled.
This
So,
was it.
you
Yes,
know,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. But I know that I'm a growing human being that evolves. So that I also know that. So
No, definitely. Well, again, like I said, it's just interesting for me to see all the different ways that people look at it, and to have some people say yes, and have some people say no, and have some people be sort of in between. Because again,
yeah,
it's all dependent on how you define it too, right?
yeah.
Some people define success by the money, the cars, the house, the this, the that, and some people define success. One of my past guests said to him, success should be an equation of happiness equals success. Once you've found happiness in your life, in all parts of your life, that's success. And
Mhm.
I couldn't agree more with him. I mean, that's my experience as well, but not everybody defines it that way. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to see how different people look at
Yeah.
it. So now we're
I
going to
would
get it.
say
Sorry.
happiness, but I would say at peace. I feel like I'm at peace with where I'm at, and I wasn't at peace when I was a teacher. I feel aligned. I feel aligned, and that's a beautiful feeling, right? When you feel aligned. So,
No, definitely. I last year when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I was jumping all over the place and doing all these different things and trying to discover who Brian was. And definitely wasn't in alignment. And that's why I got to a year later, so, in a year from, so to put it into perspective, in May of 2017, I got let go from my job. And then for the next sort of year of my life after that happened, I just started doing all these things. I started a business, I started speaking, I did all these different things. And
yep.
then I got a year later and I was like, I don't really even know what I want still. And I think a lot of it was because I wasn't aligning myself with what my goals were and who I was and what I wanted. I still had that part of me that was like, I need to build a successful business so that I can have money and this and that. And
Mhm.
there's still not that alignment with who I am. And
Mhm.
what I believe now is that I'm here to help people. Like, that is really where I feel the best, is when I can help people, whether it's through having just a conversation with them, and what I share with them about my own story helps them, whether it's this podcast, whether it's an article that I write, whatever it is. If I can help people, that's what makes me feel good. Because to me, there's no point in keeping it to yourself and hiding things, because like we said earlier on in this episode, people can relate, and that's what's going to keep us from feeling alone. And I think what's going to drive a lot more of us to move forward in our life. But again, that's just, my way of looking at it.
I agree. I agree. I think that even going back to what Brené Brown says, it's the connection, right? When you are vulnerable, when you have the courage to be vulnerable, and that's where we can connect. Right?
No,
So
definitely. I've seen that happen myself for sure. So
yeah,
alluding to what you said a couple of minutes ago, I am at the sort of the last couple of questions of the episode.
yeah. You gave me a
Um,
scripture, so I was like, okay, I think he's
it's
gonna. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know and it's totally fine. And so the one of the last questions, as you mentioned, is I do want to give people three key takeaways at the end of each episode, because if you were to listen back to the episode and take notes, I know there's way more than three. But what I want every person to walk away from is three things that they could use like tomorrow, that they could start to use and implement in their life, or thoughts, ideas, whatever it might be, to start moving them forward towards finding their own journey, or be on their own journey towards
Yeah.
success and fulfillment. So if you can give us three key takeaways, that would be awesome.
Well, I was thinking it more through the lens of what I experienced during high school, not
Hmm.
so much the teacher
Yeah.
transition to coach experience. So with that, I, said to be open to opportunity and to help, right? Because that, even though I didn't see it as an opportunity, right? At first, I was like, well, why are you asking me to go to this program? I didn't see it as an opportunity, but it was the school reaching out. It was an opportunity, and it was help, right? And so what I think is that a lot of people fall into the self-sufficiency idea that oh, I have to do it on my own to be successful, or that self-made person. And I really think it's a huge myth. I mean, the most successful people in the world actually had mentor, coaches, community, good friends, and great network, supportive network. So yeah, if you want to look and unpack people's, I mean, a great example of this is if you've read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers.
I have it on my bookshelf. I haven't read it yet, but
Oh my God, so good. And but essentially he's saying the same thing, is like, well, it's not just, you think people are made in the vacuum, and they're not. This whole myth of, and I know because we live in a very individualistic society that we want to like, oh, they just came from, yeah, probably, and they probably were resilient, but they had help along the way. Even like, listen to my story, the program, my teacher, Mr. Moda, and my good friend Tanya, right? So
yeah.
there, that changed my trajectory. So do you want the second? I'll keep going. I'll keep going. And so I say the second piece, again, thinking about what I experienced during high school, is find what heals you and develop that. So find what really resonates with you and develop that, because going back to those books, right, that really helped me as well, right? To find something I'm like, oh, that spoke to my circumstance, or spoke to where I wanted to go, or who I wanted to be. That really helped me. And for me, it was reading. For some, people, it's different. There's different modalities, different ways of, but I would say find that and stick with it to overcome any of struggles or different vulnerabilities you feel you're experiencing. And the last one I would say is, and this is something I said on another interview one time, a long time ago, a couple of years ago, is that to keep moving. And so go back to your question about, well, are you just good? Right? I'm like, oh, well, just keep moving, and not from an escape place, not because, or an insatiable, like it's never enough place, but from a place of, not being stagnant, just keep growing. Where I think that's the whole journey, right? We're going to age. That's a change, and that's involvement. So there are things that are going to happen. So I'd say just keep moving and don't get, stuck.
No,
Continue to grow, continue to heal, continue to do all those things. Yeah.
Key points. And again, the whole point is, like I said, is to make it something that people can sort of apply to their life easily, or right now, tomorrow, next week, whenever. And those are three things that I think everybody should be thinking about, because I think of, especially the last one, I think a lot of us get into what some people, put as, and I've done it myself, put as the comfort zone. And they get into that place where they're comfortable, and getting anywhere outside of that is scary, and they don't want to do it. And so they stay stagnant. And I think that's one of the worst places you can be in life, in my opinion, again, at least, because you don't have any growth there, and you don't get to discover things and live a life that I think is as full as what you would if you were to move or keep moving, as you said. So
absolutely. Just to that point, there's no growth in your comfort zone.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So to finish off the episode, it's not so much a question, but I like to give everybody an opportunity to sort of promote themselves, talk about what they've got going on, what they're doing, upcoming programs, events, whatever it might be. They're, for you, coaching programs, and just sort of put it out there, even social media, where the best place to get in touch with you is, so that if our guests want to, they can. So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Brian. So yeah, I wouldn't say this is so much of a promotion, because I do have things that I'm developing. Speaking of growing and evolving, so I wouldn't say this is more of a promotion than more of an invitation. If you, could relate, or my story resonates with you, and you feel that you're getting a sense that I could help in some way, then I invite you to have a half an hour complimentary get acquainted call with me, and to see if we're compatible, and to see if I can help, right? So both things. So I would say more invitation. It's a half an hour complimentary call, and we can go from there. And in terms of following me or anything like that, I know that's something that you mentioned with your structure. I would say that the three platforms that I'm currently using are Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and it's under my full name. So
Perfect. Would that be the best order too, would you say? Like, is Facebook the one that you're more predominant on, or?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
LinkedIn and Instagram are,
they're there, but
I think close second, but I'd say Facebook, which is so funny, because I was a late adopter of Facebook. I was kind of resisting it. I was part of the resistance for a while.
I was the same way with Instagram and
really?
Facebook. I even got rid of my account for a while, and then I came back a bit. So I totally understand. And for that,
go ahead.
The 30-minute consultation that you talked about, or acquaintance call, where is the best place to get people to book that? Is it your website or somewhere else, or? Yeah, so your website?
You can contact me through my website, or email me at info@GorettReis.com. Again, under my full name. If you don't know how to spell it, I'm sure you're going to have my name.
Yeah, it'll be there anyways too. And I'll link your website in the show notes, but I just wanted to make sure that people know where to go, so that you don't have 1,000 people message you on Facebook saying, "Can I book my call?"
Well, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely you can just email at info@GorettReis.com, or just go through my website.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, again, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you opening up and sharing some of those stories and just sort of giving us a look at your life and your journey so far. And I learned stuff. Like I said, I've known you for a couple of years now. I knew a little bit about your story, but learning a little bit more today just gives me, a new appreciation for what you've been through and how you've gotten to where you are. And again, sort of what you alluded to on your first point there is that, there's no such thing as self-made, and that we all have our journeys, and there's people that are going to be there to help us through them. And you've, like I said at the beginning, helped me with mine. And so again, thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me and to share your story.
Thank you for having me again and for this opportunity. I think, speaking of vulnerability, one connection I did want to quickly make: unless you love the camera and unless you are just a natural, right? I think it takes vulnerability to do this, to be on video, to speak, so.
No, 100%. I know when I reached out to people, not everybody's been so eager, and I can understand that, but I think that it's a start for some people. And when you start doing things like this, like we said earlier on in the episode, when you start putting yourself out there, you'll realize you're not alone. There's other people that can relate, and you're going to either make new friends, build a new community, whatever way you want to look at it. So again, thanks a lot, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Vulnerable Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps get the word out and means more than you know. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram at vulnerable.podcast or on Facebook and LinkedIn by searching Vulnerable Podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram at the BE Almeida. That's the BEALMEIDA, or by searching my name on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you know anyone with a great story of going from struggle to success, please let me know, as I would love to interview them for the show. I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and see you next week.